Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today. And, I've been getting phone calls and a lot of messages from you because you've been tuning in on the YouTube channel, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Stay right there and like and share. Tell people about the show and continue to share the show. Share, 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 share. And then click that bell so that when we come up, you'll be notified as soon as we do with whatever it is that we put out there. So please, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, please like and subscribe and click that bell. And of course, go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. We are there as well. The Santita Jackson and Friends page, no other page. That's it. And Reverend Jesse Jackson's page, I share it with him too. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter, also known as X, at Santita J. So we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the Crumbleys, that Michigan couple who have just been sentenced. Their son, Ethan, James and Jennifer Crumbley, their son, Ethan, shot and killed four of his classmates in Michigan. And when we found out about their behavior, the question became this: should they be charged also? Now he's been sentenced to life without parole. We're going to let, of course, attorney C.K. Hoffler set the table on that in the next hour. But now the parents, they've been sentenced to some time too. What do you think about that? And what will be the fallout about that? I mean, because many people said this is a precedent-setting case, but we're looking at another case that that's going to have tremendous significance too. Some of us remember the Nixon pardon, right? And the pardon presumes that you committed a crime, that you committed a misdeed. And who can forget the summers of 73 and 74, those of us who were alive, even those of us who were children? It was such a tense atmosphere. I mean, attorney C.K. Hoffler, legal analyst for Court TV, chair of the board of Rainbow Push, former president of the National Bar Association, attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant civil libertarian, National Conference of Black Lawyers, and attorney Dijon. I'm just kidding. Daryl Jones. I love it. I love it. Of course, the chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. We've missed you the past few days, but you've been out registering people to vote and training them how to train other people. And we're going to be talking about these cases as we get closer and closer to the election season, because we need to know how to vote and what's happening to our vote, because it's been more threatened than it has been ever before. And no one's talking about it. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about presidential immunity. Should a president be absolved of any responsibility for the crimes that he and hopefully one day soon she will commit while in office? That is something that President Trump is going to the Supreme Court over. And it could have long-lasting implications, not just going forward, but looking back at our presidents, because we all know that our presidents have committed some grave misdeeds, but they're not prosecuted for them. And sometimes they're exalted for them, just depending upon how you cloak it. So he's claiming that because he was still in office when he engaged in actions that led to one of his federal indictments, he should be immune from criminal charges. So let me read this to you. This is pivoting on this sentence, attorney C.K. Hoffler. I thought this was interesting when I read it in the Constitutional Center blog. The immunity case in Donald Trump versus the United States will center on one simple sentence: whether, and if so, to what extent does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office? What does that mean? And what does that mean going forward for a president? Many people argue that this puts unnecessary constrictions upon a president. The president is boxed in. Others are saying that the president's not above the law. Now, we do know that in America, like in other places around the world, there are people who are above the law. That's a fact. So let's cut through all the hypocrisy and let's look at what we're dealing with. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, before I come to you, Attorney Mark Fancher, because I'd like to get a civil libertarian's take, because I know the ACLU and other groups that protect our civil liberties and rights have weighed in on this, and they've said that Trump is in the wrong. What say you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler?
I mean, Santita, this is a very, very important question. This is probably one of the most significant constitutional questions that we're going to confront um, probably in my lifetime. I say that because this question of presidential immunity is always lurking in the background whenever we have a president who's in office. There are many who have been critical of the United States for not being a signatory to the ICC, the International Criminal Courts, as we support the prosecution of many former head of state who are involved in genocide and the like. And there are many who feel that the United States over time has also been engaged in genocide, whether it's through slavery, whether it's through internment camps that were in the United States. And the United States has never been prosecuted for that. And there's a reason, because we don't subscribe, we're not a signatory to the ICC. But when we talk about presidential immunities, and the reason why I mention that is because many presidents around the world who have been prosecuted for criminal acts have been prosecuted through the ICC as a tribunal. So when we talk about presidential immunity in this context, we're talking about the immunity afforded. Is there constitutional immunity for the president of the United States in the United States for acts that he or she hopefully one day may engage in? And generally, there is a level of immunity, but the question is, how far is too far? And did former President Donald Trump go too far when he committed the alleged criminal acts that he is now where he's been indicted and where he is now being prosecuted for? Did he do that? Was he guilty of that? And should he be immune if he committed those acts while he was president of the United States? Now, let's bear in mind the hush money case, which begins on April 15th, would not fall in that category, because those actions alleged in the hush money case were prior to him really becoming president of the United States. So the hush money case would not fall within the purview of any type of presidential immunity, because it would be immunity for acts while he served as president of the United States. However, potentially, the question would he be immune from prosecution in the case in Georgia that District Attorney Fani Willis is prosecuting in her team? Because the actions of January 6th and any of his involvement, that's certainly, technically he had been defeated, but Joe Biden wasn't sworn in. So there's going to be a question as to whether those actions, which most people say they were committed while he was still technically president of the United States. But some of the other actions, some of them were in New York State, for instance, that the financial crimes, those were, and like I said, the April 15th litigation, that was before. So I don't know that he would be immune from prosecution of those crimes. But there are a whole host of other potential crimes and crimes that he's being prosecuted for now, Santita, that people believe he should be immune from, because they believe that the office of the presidency you don't want to clip the wings of the president from doing certain things that he or she feels that he or she needs to do. But I maintain those interests should not be criminal. But we know historically that
CK. She just went out. Okay. We will come back.
I'm having.
Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you all hear me?
Now we can. Yes.
I'm sorry. So you weren't able to hear what I said before? That's okay.
No, not at all.
I was on a roll, Santita.
You still on that roll? Come on.
Oh, okay. So let me set the table. Let me set the table again as it relates to presidential immunity. This would not, if Donald Trump does have presidential immunity, it would not cover the actions that took place before he became president of the United States, ostensibly. Mm-hmm. So the hush money case theoretically would not be covered if there is such a thing as presidential immunity that would cover the actions once he became president. All the January 6 activities would happen that's subject to the case in Georgia. None of that ostensibly would be covered if there is presidential immunity given to him in some type of constitutional interpretation. So the hush money case would continue. He could be prosecuted on the hush money case. This is what I believe. He could be convicted in the hush money case, and he would not have immunity. But for the activities that he engaged in when he was president, potentially, if the U.S. Supreme Court deems it to be the case, he would be immune from prosecution. I personally think that he and other presidents should not be allowed to conduct themselves in a way that triggers criminal statutes. And I know that there's a fine line because historically in this country, we have toppled governments. I mean, this is not news. Presidents in this country historically have engaged in what people might consider criminal activity. We're not a signatory to the ICC. So we in the United States, none of our leaders have ever been prosecuted on through the international criminal courts. Although many other former head of state, current head of state in many countries throughout the world, especially African countries and former Soviet bloc countries, have been prosecuted under. I see the issue.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, CK, that I mean, indeed, many in the global South, which is much of the world, most of the world, they say, the ICC, please, this is white people prosecuting black and brown people, and we are over it. And even, I mean, and the thing is, when you talked about the clipping of the wings of a president, while you don't want to do that, I mean, I think I wonder what the remedy is. I mean, because I'm assuming that this case is about January 6th. It's not about Stormy Daniels. It's not about a case that, quite frankly, is confusing me coming out of New York, because we all know that if you want to sell your home, you need to put your white friend in it because it's devalued if they think it's a black owner. And so it seems that, I mean, one of the things I think that's been exposed in that case is the shell game that American wealth is. If people think you're wealthy, they'll lend you money if you're white. But, other people, it's just too hard to access capital. And that's interesting. But that's another conversation for another time. Attorney Mark Fancher, what do you make of this particular case? I mean, because I think Attorney C.K. Hoffler makes a profound point about the clipping of the wings of a president. But can you give a president too much space? I mean, what do you make of this case?
Well, I think that Donald Trump's lawyers have a habit of making up things when they don't like reality. One of his former lawyers said that he's entitled to make up alternative facts if he's so inclined to do that. And in this case, they're making up alternative law. The concept of immunity is not a strange or foreign notion, and there are good policy reasons for it, even though the concept is sometimes misused and abused. It contemplates certain people in government who, because of the nature of their jobs, they're going to do things, or they have to do things that would cause the ordinary citizen to become liable if they did the same thing. So, for example, police officers have what's called qualified immunity because it's understood that police officers, in the course of making arrests, sometimes have to get a little bit rough with criminal suspects. And they don't want police officers having to deal with lawsuits for every occasion when they get a little bit rough with somebody when they're placing them under arrest. That concept has been misused and abused, and it's why so many people oppose it right now against the backdrop of so much police brutality and misconduct that we've seen. But prosecutors enjoy a certain degree of immunity. Judges enjoy a certain degree of immunity because because the nature of their jobs, they're going to do things that are going to upset people, and they can't be hamstrung by having to defend against lawsuits. But in most, if not all of these cases, what's contemplated is immunity from civil liability. In other words, this prevents people from suing people for money for things that they do. It is rarely contemplated that somebody is going to be immune from criminal liability, which is what Trump's lawyers are saying should be the case with respect to a president. And they're saying that even in the face of clear language, in the Constitution and elsewhere, which implies, if not says expressly, that it is understood that presidents can be criminally liable. I mean, you can't impeach a president unless it's demonstrated that they are guilty of high crimes or misdemeanors, not just felonies, but misdemeanors too. So there has to be some criminal liability on the part of a president before you can even think about impeaching them. So why would they suggest that a president can never be criminally responsible or criminally liable? And the fact that presidents have not been criminally prosecuted as a routine matter is not so much a function of the state of the law and the prohibition against them being prosecuted. It's just simply because prosecutors have used their discretion not to bring criminal charges against presidents. And in cases where it looks like a president might be criminally liable, it has been the case, as was the case with Richard Nixon, that Gerald Ford decided to issue a pardon of any potential criminal liability that
Okay.
he might suffer.
Stay right there just before you continue. In the Nixon case, you get a pardon if you've committed a crime, or it might appear that you've committed a crime. This is to absolve you. What was that about?
Yes, I mean, because of the Watergate fiasco and the cover-up and all of the presumed crimes that were associated with it, Gerald Ford issued essentially a preemptive pardon, saying that he was essentially rendering President Nixon free of any worries of having to be criminally prosecuted for the things that he did. And his rationale was that he wanted to preserve national stability at a time when the nation needed to heal. And so when you get to the question of like the International Criminal Court, putting aside for the moment how it has actually functioned and the racist way in which it has used its power, the idea was that in many governments, you have presidents or prime ministers or heads of state, regardless of their titles, who have locked up the criminal justice system. They have fixed things so that even if they commit crimes, their domestic courts are not going to prosecute them. So the idea behind the International Criminal Court was that when the domestic criminal apparatus is not used to prosecute a president, then this court would step in and undertake such a prosecution. And the United States of America is a prime example of a country that has locked up the criminal apparatus. The United States presidents have engaged in lawlessness, both domestic criminal acts and international criminal acts over a long period of time, just as a standard method of doing business. And it is the reason, and they know it. And that is the reason why they have never signed on to the International Criminal Court's statute, the Rome Statute, because they know that if they did it, that they would be subject to prosecution. And so, there are all of these things which imply knowledge of the fact that presidents can be prosecuted, that they are criminal, and that sometimes criminal prosecution is the right thing to do. And I can only assume, assuming the best, which is always a risky thing to do with this Supreme Court, that the reason that they're willing to take this up is to provide some clarity on this question.
Attorney Darrell Jones, what are your thoughts?
Well, Santita, I somewhat agree with what Marcus laid out, and certainly with what CK has laid out. I think that when we start talking about the immunity and the president of the United States, if the president is in office and they're making official decisions, then there's an immunity that should be involved, and that's when we start talking about the official acts. Are there official acts that the president is taking that he's seeking immunity from? I mean, it's an official act deciding whether or not to deploy the military or to put bombs or whatever in a place. That would probably be more of an official act. If it's something that that happens outside of the presidency, that outside of an official act, then there should not be immunity. I think it's a pretty clear question, at least in my head. When you start blurring the line is when you have a president, former President Trump, where it's a situation where he's trying to put himself back in a bottle, right? The milk back in a bottle. The crime's already been committed. He's trying to figure out a way out of it. The way out of it is to now say that, well, I should have been immune from anything, that happened while I was president. By the way, I should be immune beyond my presidency as well. So that if it goes beyond my presidency, I should continue with that immunity. And that's the question that the Supreme Court is going to take up. I think it's going to be interesting to watch them deal with it. Because, we love to deal with the concept that no person is above the law and all that stuff that we're generally taught. In this situation with former President Trump, he's going to be facing at least 3 of the judges that he has appointed to the Supreme Court to make this decision, and a majority of judges that certainly represent a minority of the opinion of the people that are of the country, that are of the United States. So when we start dealing with the immunity question here and how it's going to be used, he's tried to weaponize it, if you will, to try to stop the prosecutions of him. It's going to be interesting to see how this Supreme Court then begins to wield that weapon, because they're going to, and I would imagine they will say that he's not immune from all prosecutions post-presidency. I'm just assuming that's the logical thing that I think most of us here would agree on. The question will become, are they going to play with this official act terminology? At what point is it official act? Is there a continuing official act? Are they going to try to fashion something that will fit the immunity category and allow the former president to not be held responsible or liable for the crimes that he's been alleged to have committed at this point? And I think that's where we are right now on this. I feel fairly confident in saying both CK and Mark are saying there's no way that there's going to be a finding that the president has immunity and a continuing immunity. I feel fairly confident in saying that. I feel less confident in saying that this court will not find a way to play with the official acts portion of that to try to remove him from some type of liability and some type of responsibility. That's my big concern right now.
Well, and I wonder, just going forward and going backward, how that would work. I mean, it was always understood that there are places in the world where George W. Bush cannot go because he could be prosecuted. Mm-hmm. Henry Kissinger couldn't go many places in the world because he would be prosecuted. I mean, these have been among the biggest, most influential figures of this age. And CK, you spent an enormous amount of time in Africa, helping emerging countries form their constitutions, develop their laws, helping their presidents to really get settled in office. And my question, given your experience, particularly your experience on the international stage and most specifically in the global South, what about the ICC? Why is it that the United States will not sign on? What, are we afraid of something? I mean, are they afraid that Brazil and the formerly colonized states are? I mean, what are we? Are they afraid they would come in on us? I mean, what's the deal? Why won't we sign on to the ICC?
I mean, I think
for those who are listening, what is the ICC, and what would we be signing on to?
So the ICC is an international criminal court. It's an international forum through which prosecution of war crimes in particular, and other forms of injustice, genocide, if you will, as well, can take place. It's an international forum, and it was created through the Geneva Convention or the Rome Convention. Some time ago, it was created a long time ago, really as a result of injustices throughout the world. And it was created to really, I believe, prevent there from being another Holocaust, if you will. In that was one of the reasons why it was created, amongst other things. And the reason why I believe the United States is not a signatory is because, yes, then we would be subjected potentially to prosecution. And that is not going to be something that the United States would ever be willing to do, not in that form. At least that's what I believe. And while we can support, give a wink, wink, nod, nod, when certain former head of state or head of state that are not aligned with the interests of the United States are prosecuted for war crimes and the like, we simply will not be an active member because we do not want to be subjected to that jurisdiction. That's what I believe is the reality. And that is why I believe we will not subject ourselves to that. Now, having said that, the United Nations also has some certain types of limited prosecutorial authority. There are committees, there are commissions that emanate from the United States, and we are a member of the United Nations, and we are a member of the United Nations. However, the politics of the United Nations make it, and let me give an example. There was a strong condemnation of the murders of George Floyd and so many other African Americans in this country. There's a strong condemnation of slavery. There's a strong condemnation of a lot of things that the United States actively, intentionally engaged in over the course of the past 400 years. But there has been no prosecution, if you will, execution of that. Yes, condemnation. We stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no active ability to prosecute pursuant to that. Whereas with the ICC, there is an ability. It's just that it manifests itself more so on Black and brown communities or countries that have Black and brown leadership, former Soviet bloc countries. So I think that there is a certain amount of hypocrisy, if you will, there, Santita, with that. But I believe that that's why the U.S. has absolutely no interest in ever signing on to the ICC.
Well, I mean, Mark, do you think that that's going to hold as it's no longer a unipolar world? I mean, America, increasingly, we're in the 21st century. They say that the 22nd century will be the African century. We're seeing the colonized powers emerge as economic and social and cultural superpowers. I mean, we're seeing that with the African continent. We're seeing it with the Indian subcontinent. We're seeing it we're seeing it in South America with Brazil. We're seeing it and in other countries. We're seeing it happen everywhere. Will America, do you think, be able to be an outlier when it comes to these laws and holding our leadership accountable as we, CK, we're always pointing at North Korea, human rights abuses. I mean, all these people, and people around the world, and you know it because you've spent so much time out the country and we've been together. They look at us and they say, "Are you kidding?"
Well, they think we're the greatest hypocrites. You know, Santita, I think people think that we're the greatest hypocrites. When I lived overseas in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, with the travel and the work that I've done in setting up, you know, the first quote unquote democratic elections and all that, and helping countries and all that kind of stuff, they really, at one point, we were the gold standard for democracy, for voting and all that, but we no longer are, and people think that we're very hypocritical. And when I think of the work, Daryl, that you do, the work, Santita, that your dad, Reverend Jesse Jackson, has done, not just in the United States, but throughout the world, and promoting rights, human rights, civil rights, voting. And when I think of where we are today, we have opened ourselves up to the criticisms that the international community has really thrown at us, especially when we look at the events, for instance, of January 6th, when we look at the case in Georgia. What in the world are we talking about? If any of those allegations are true, and we already know based on the committee, based on the congressional committees and all the evidence that came out as it relates to January 6th, we would theoretically and are the laughingstock of the world as we're being critical of other countries. I mean, this is ridiculous.
CK, I haven't gotten over 2000 because that was out, and 2004. Those were out and out thefts of the election. They were of those elections.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, and then you had the Supreme Court co-sign it. Really? I mean, come on. Everybody, people looking at us, Mark, like we are absolute hypocrites. I see Dwight McKee stepped in. I'm going to bring him onto the stage in a minute. But Mark, will this, going forward in the world, will the world allow us to do this? To be outliers when it comes to the law?
Well, I think we have to get out of the mindset of the United States representing all of us. The United States is a racket, which is why all of these things are happening. The United States government is really the apparatus, the machinery that's used by an oligarchy, by an empire, in order to impose its will on the rest of the world, and certainly on the population within the US borders. And in order for it to do what it has to do, it has to overpower, it has to overwhelm, it has to oppress, it has to exploit, it has to consistently engage in criminal conduct. And for that reason, there is never a domestic prosecution of US presidents, because as a matter of course, in order to do what the empire needs it to do, they have to engage in all kinds of criminal activity and criminal conduct. Theoretically, they are not immune from criminal prosecution. Theoretically, they can and should be prosecuted for crimes. When you talk about immunity, you're talking only about making government officials immune from civil liability, where people file lawsuits against them for bad acts and get paid money for it. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about immunity. But even police officers, even though they might enjoy qualified immunity, police officers sometimes are prosecuted for crimes. Just because they're immune from being sued doesn't mean that they can't and are not from time to time prosecuted for engaging in criminal activity, which they do. And presidents are the same. They can't. The Constitution talks about high crimes and misdemeanors, which makes it clear that yes, there can be findings that they have engaged in crimes. The only question is, as a practical matter, will anybody take up the job of prosecuting a president? And as a practical matter, it's very rare. It does not happen. I don't know that we've seen it happen. But just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that the law says that you can't do it.
Mm.
And that's the point that Trump is trying to press by saying that you can't do it. And I don't know how the Supreme Court's going to rule. On the one hand, if they want to be true to what the law says, then they will say, of course, yes, the presidents can be prosecuted for crimes. It's clear from the law that you can. If they want to be hacks, if they want to be the more errand boys and errand girls for the empire, then they'll come down with some crazy ruling that says that presidents cannot be prosecuted. But the objective of the empire is to protect their errand boys, to protect their presidents, which is why they will not sign on to the Rome Statute, which is why they will not make themselves subject to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, because they know that they're consistently engaged in criminal activity, both domestically and abroad. The National Conference of Black Lawyers petitioned the International Criminal Court to prosecute the president for engaging in crimes during Hurricane Katrina, and to prosecute government officials for the things that they did in the aftermath and during the course of the events of Katrina. And what we've seen as a practical matter is that the International Criminal Court has prosecuted not only, but overwhelmingly, the prosecutions have been of African heads of state and others in the global south. And there was a study done, an analysis done, which said that really the underlying reason for it is because of the fact that it gets its money from the Western powers. That's where it gets its money and its support. And so, if the question is, will all of this change? It will change when the empire is either brought down through the mass will of the people or when it collapses of its own weight. But until then, as long as the empire continues to hold sway in this world, as long as it continues to dominate, the people who do the bidding of the empire, who are the ones who are the front men and the front women for the empire, ones who preserve the power of the oligarchy, they will be protected.
I mean, before I come to you, Dwight, I mean, Attorney Darrell Jones, it must make your hair stand on end as you look at, I mean, the 2020 election, certainly January 6th was a fiasco. I get it. But I'm telling you, I'm still in my feelings about the 2000 election. I'm still in my feelings about 2004. I saw, God rest his soul, John Conyers go to Ohio and almost stand by himself and say they have stolen this election. I saw the look on Senator John Edwards' face when John Kerry said, I'm out. He was like, these people stealing the election from us. What are you doing? I mean, I saw my brother argue passionately, almost unto the point of tears, in the well of the U.S. House of Representatives, begging them to continue with the count in 2000, along with so many of his other colleagues. And then we rail on and on and on about voter integrity, about democracy, and all of that. I just see hypocrisy here. And it's almost as if when you're going after Trump, it's personal and it's not about principle. And that's what bothers me. I'm not saying let him go should he have transgressed and trespassed, but I think we've got to look at the whole system and be honest about it, Darrell.
No, I think that you're right on point with regard to looking at the entire system. I think that one of the interesting points to remember, though, Santita, is this. Following the 2020 election and following all of the chicanery, all the trickery, all the voter suppression that was occurring around the country, what did states like the state of Georgia and the state of Florida then come back and do, right? They then come back and they introduce legislation to put in place the very practices of what was suppressing votes. What the state of Georgia subsequently did, they started saying that, well, if the local election commissions are not counting the votes the way we think they should be counted, then we will replace them with those with the electors that are appointed by the state elected officials. So they start replacing these commissions that make the determination on the votes with people that they think are going to be friendly and render and tender the results that they're looking for. That's the exact antithesis of what we're looking for in the democracy. Where it's no longer just the will of the people that the person with the greatest votes wins. It becomes a function of, this isn't the person I wanted to win. So how do I set this system up so that I can interject my people into the system to get the results that I want? That's the appearance that it has when you have states like Georgia and Florida that talk about replacing electors, replacing locally elected commissioners, so that they will match what the General Assembly in that state want to have happen. That, I think, is one of the things that gives the biggest black eye to our democracy. We can't go around talking about the integrity of the elections, and we have our state legislators, putting in place people that are trying to make outcome determinative decisions, regardless of how the people have voted in their various states. So all of that, I think, really does weigh heavily with regards to how we are perceived around the country. All that we do with the guns at the ballot boxes, where we have, I just came back from Arizona, which is why I'm a little jet lagged right now. I just come back from talking about how they had guns at the drop boxes in Arizona, trying to intimidate voters. What they're doing with the Native Americans, those on Native lands, to try to suppress their vote and keep them from voting. We have all these things that are occurring, and yet, it pains me to say that the United States is not the leader in a free democracy, because we're suppressing people and their access to the ballot and their access to being able to vote. So, that's the appearance that I think is really there. That, we'd love to say that we're the beacon of light and we're all of this and that when it comes to voting. But when you start to peel back, the layers here, you see all these warts, all of these problems, all of these, attempts that are being made to suppress voters and to suppress the will of voters. And it's my analysis that that's how we have the Supreme Court that we have in place right now. It goes back to that 2020, that 2000 election with regards to the justices that are now sitting.
Yeah.
They were not the majority people that won, that are making the appointments, and now they're going to make this determination with immunity with President Trump. It just saddens me. It truly does.
Well, they've been making this. Presidents have been immunized ever since Dwight McKee. But it seems that it's very interesting that now Trump is bringing this to the Supreme Court. And I'm no Trump apologist, everybody. It's just, I like the game to be played by one set of rules, because then I know CK and Mark and Daryl what I'm dealing with. But when the rules are all over the place, look, I'm a singer and solo and in choirs. You can't have people out of tune, and you can't have someone on one meter on you and you're on the other. That does not work. We don't have harmony. We have
a cacophony.
A cacophony. It's crazy. Dissonance. It's like, whoa, stop. And that's what I see right now. Dwight McKee, what do you make of this? Trump pressing about immunity, about, look, if I did it while I was in office, I need to be immunized. What do you think about that?
Well, on CK's point, what this has been a gold standard for is propaganda. It's what America had that China didn't have, that Russia didn't have, was Hollywood. And so we could export our own narrative. But the fact of the matter is, the country is a criminal enterprise, and it was founded on crime. And so historically, we've been immune from all of our deeds because much of our crime is legal. It is not like they were crimes, they were policy that became crimes in hindsight. I think that Trump is just trying to codify what has already been, historic has already been, all the way back to, Andrew Jackson forcing the natives to walk the Trail of Tears, and not enforcing at his discretion the Supreme Court decisions. He was always a government unto himself. This is not a new thing for this country. And the only reason Trump is up for discussion about it is because somehow it's really a fight between crime families. And they're fighting for who's going to have control of the wharf and who's going to have control of the construction. And so, if you can use the government to neutralize your competition, then you do that, particularly if you already are the government. But it's really a fight between crime families.
So where do we go from here, Dwight? And Dwight, I need you to move the phone back just a bit so we can see more of your face. Okay, there you go.
Where do we go?
Where do you see this going?
Yeah, that's a different question.
It is.
It's going to go where it's been going. Is that if they're able to neutralize Trump in the win, then the Democratic crime family will have the impunity to do what it seeks to do. And if they don't win and the Republicans win, then they have the impunity to do what they do. And, what it comes down to is who's going to have the power and the right to exploit resources around the world. Is it going to be the Republican gangsters or the Democratic gangsters? Who's going to take the oil out of Gaza? Who's going to be able to exploit the resources in the Ukraine? who's going to be able to dominate, whatever interest that they're looking to dominate. Which criminals in what crime family is going to have access to the military power to impose its will to exploit people somewhere in the world?
So where do you see that? Move the camera back a bit. So where do you see Dwight? Okay, they say right there. Where do you see Trump winning, or do you see him losing?
Oh no, it's going to be business as usual. It don't matter if he wins or loses.
Mm.
If he wins, then he has the right. If he loses, then they have the right. But the issue is not who has the immunity to be charged. The issue is who have the power to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really does not matter.
So I mean,
because it's not about a person.
Right.
It's about a system.
So you're saying ultimately the president is immune.
Say that again?
So you say ultimately whoever's in charge has immunity.
Yeah, whoever's in charge. What does it matter if Al Capone is in charge or Frank Nitt is in charge? The goal is going to be the same.
Oh, rescue me, CK. CK, rescue me. Would you help a sister out?
Oh, Dwight McKee, it's so good to hear your voice.
Oh, man. Oh, my country, tears of thee. So come on, CK, what do you make of this? Because you've dealt with some pretty rough characters, but you know what? Politics is rough business. I remember when we were.
It is rough business. Look, it's rough business. Look, it's rough business, not business. Rough business. I mean, Dwight McKee. But anyway,
what? I'm like, he's characterizing the whole government system as a bunch of thugs. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Am I going to be on the air tomorrow? What? Oh,
I missed you, CK.
Oh, God.
I missed you too. I've had a trial followed by an arbitration. So I've been, and both in Florida. So I've been very tied up and unable, unfortunately, to participate as much as I wanted to. Just being focused, but I'm back now, and I have to take a couple days just to regroup. When you spend a lot of trial work for me, and Daryl and Mark, I know you can relate to this. Is probably the most intense part of our practice, and it's the biggest burnout part of our practice too. And so I'm coming out of that, and I always thank God, thank Jesus that I do come out of those of trial and arbitrations in one piece, because it's like being at war every single time. So, but it's good to be back.
Well, you know what? I have like 4.5 minutes, and I want each of you to have a minute so we can close out, because we are coming up on, I think April 25th is when we'll hear arguments in the Supreme Court, and it's just interesting. Well, I mean, CK, what do you see? Where do you see this going? Because this court has been surprising. They've rendered some surprising decisions.
The court has rendered some surprising decisions, but I think on this, I am not holding my breath that the court will rule inconsistent with the conservative leanings that exist on the court. I believe that this court is going to at least provide an opening for there to be presidential immunity. An opening. And that, quite frankly, is all that Donald Trump's attorneys will need. Now, I want to say this. I may disagree with what our former president stands for, what he's done, the alleged criminal activity, the convictions that he's received in terms of fraud, and all of that. I may have a certain personal feeling about that, which I do. But the fact that his attorneys are being creative gangsters in their approach to defending him is something that is not so uncommon. To see lawyers be, let me rephrase that. The fact that the attorneys are being very creative in their defense is not uncommon, because as lawyers, we are held to a standard of being zealous advocates on behalf of our clients. What is unusual, however, is when lawyers step over the line ethically and professionally and engage in some of the activities that I've seen his lawyers do, whether they are being openly, notoriously critical of the judge in the judge's face in court, and being completely disrespectful of the judicial process. That is unusual because that is, frankly, you can get your bar license taken from you for doing things like that. That's what's unusual, because there's got to be a fine line between being a zealous advocate on behalf of your client, being the consummate advocate, and stepping over the line and putting your own license in jeopardy. And in my impression, that's what we're seeing. And that is why some of his former attorneys are either in jail, have served time, were convicted, have been pardoned, all of that. And then people like Giuliani are probably going down for the count. So I just say, Santita, that we will watch this process, but I think the Supreme Court's going to give a small opening.
Daryl Jones, I've got about 30 seconds for you.
Yeah, Santita, I mean, very quickly, I am hopeful that the Supreme Court does not give that opening to Trump for the immunity. I don't think they should. I don't think it's grounded in law nor in fact. But again, this is a Supreme Court that was not appointed by presidents that won the popular vote. So it's very possible that they will take care of their friend Donald Trump and try to leave some sliver of room for him to have some type of immunity.
Mark Fancher.
Yeah, I continue to maintain that presidents are bit players in the grand drama of all of this. And how the Supreme Court rules will, I think, depend largely upon what is in the best interest of the empire. And I think that it has been valuable to have this criminal leverage with respect to an individual like Trump, who has demonstrated his willingness to go off script, to go rogue, and to do things that are inconsistent with the best interests of the empire. And if they want to continue to have control over him, then the court is likely to rule that, yes, he can be prosecuted criminally, because that's what they need in order to keep him under control.
It really is about keeping the empire intact. Wonder how long that will happen. What did Gore Vidal say? Someone asked him about America, and he said that his profoundest disappointment was that we could have achieved civilization, but we were ambitious for empire, and here we are. Empires crumble, civilizations last and last and last and last and last. And I'm with Dr. King. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? We've had, all of our presidents have been immune, but they have all done things that have been wrong. And I'm hoping that one day that we will have the highest standard, but then that's something that we're going to have to seek. And we all get the president and the leadership that we deserve. So let's think about this very differently, everybody. Let's lift as we climb. Attorney Mark Fancher, Attorney Daryl Jones, Attorney C.K. Hopler, to see ya. Sending you so much love. In the second hour, let's talk about the Crumbleys, James and Jennifer Crumbly. They have been found guilty. They have been sentenced to jail time, to prison time, because their son Ethan killed 4 of his classmates, but they ignored his warnings. He said, I'm having hallucinations. Mom and Dad, he texted his mom, I'm in a lot of pain. Mentally, I'm in a bad place. She was riding her horse and didn't even respond to the boy. And he sent her a text. Did you not get the text from me? She said, yeah. Yeah, well, they are going to be going to prison. So in watching the victim impact statements today was absolutely painful. CK, I know you got to go, but in the next hour, I need you to set the table for us, because you've been covering this for Court TV, and I need you to let us know, give us an overview. But when we come back on the other side, in the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show, we'll be talking about James and Jennifer Crumbly. What do you think? Should parents be held responsible and maybe serve jail time when their children commit crimes? Or should we take this on a case-by-case basis? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page and at Santita J on Twitter. Back in just a minute.